Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Random Redshirt podcast. As always, I am one of the hosts, Zach, and the other host is Chris. What's up, my brother from another mother?
Hello, my dear friend Zach. Excellent to see you. I hope you've had well, I know your week has been busy, but it's excellent to see you and we can unwind together. This will be great. Hello, everyone from
Yeah.
around the worlds and the interweb and Antarctica, perhaps even Greenland. We'll see. This is great. Yeah,
Perhaps.
perhaps. Great to see you.
Yes. Oh, so that's the wrong
Green,
franchise.
yeah, green, green Yoda.
You mentioned green. I thought maybe your Yoda would come out, but
Hmm. Yes,
there
there we
you
go.
go.
Yoda comes out.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, it's been a busy week. Week
Oh
went
my gosh,
fast.
man. Oh,
Yeah.
it was a very busy week. But I know yours was pretty busy too, right? So
Yeah, I was pretty busy. Yeah, typically everything comes a
yeah,
blur.
as you say, we survived another week in our professional lives, thankfully.
Yeah.
It's interesting, Chris, because our podcast name is called the Random Redshirt Podcast, right?
hmm
Uh, and we always joke about how we survive every episode because we have so far.
Yeah. Yeah.
It makes me wonder, what is our survival chances of surviving our professional lives versus surviving a podcast? I think surviving the professional life might be more challenging than surviving our podcast. So, in fact, I know it would be, right?
Yeah, it could be. I mean, there's so many like places in our professional lives where like you can go off track like so like easily. And
Yeah.
and you're it's subject to every organization has its own like rules and fads and politics that have to be navigated through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a much more dangerous territory to
Yeah.
navigate than it is the podcast that we this is obviously just for fun. But
Yeah.
yes, welcome everybody. Thank you so much as always for joining us here on the show. We very much appreciate it. Be sure to go to Facebook and Instagram and Threads and YouTube if you're on the audio podcast platforms or vice versa. We're on all the podcast platforms and YouTube. If you're listening to us only, you can go to YouTube and find the video version of this and many more. And you can subscribe there and do all the other social media jazz. But we always want to take time to welcome our audience members. It's very much appreciated. And we are continuing through our Spotlight series, which we were just chatting about this a minute ago, is just been amazing. So for those of you
Yeah.
listening or watching, and if you've been listening or watching long enough, and even if you haven't, we've officially blessed off and dubbed Chris as the Spotlight Series chief. He now will determine our future Spotlight series as we've been doing. We did one on the Mirror Universe. We've done ones on other episodes. And on this one, we've been doing the Star Trek pilots where we go through and watch each of the pilots of each of the Star Trek series and discuss them. We've done TOS, TNG, DS9, and now we are on to Voyager, which is wonderful. Before we jump into that, however, Chris, I do think it's important we take time for a minute and because we didn't the last time and I'd meant to, but just take a minute to mention how much we are thinking and praying for all those involved in all the fires in LA. There are many people that have been affected by this. I know there's been a couple of different Star Trek actors who have been affected by this, including Denise Crosby, who, from what I read, lost the only home she's ever owned and everything in it. We know these have been devastating, and it's just been awful for everybody involved. So we want to just let all of you know that we're thinking of you, having lived in California for 9 of the last 12 years. I'm very, very aware of how bad wildfires are. We had one or two scares ourselves where we lived. And let you know that we're all thinking of you, and we thank so much the firefighters and first responders and everybody that has been helping out with this because we know it's been an awful, awful situation.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. They're absolutely like in our thoughts, in our hearts, in our prayers, and we hope it only gets better from here on as California and all the families to try and rebuild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I hope that you know there's hopefully something good that can come of this. I don't know what, but hopefully from something so horrific and tragic that something good will come out of it. Hopefully that will be some type of change in which they are able to make things better and to the point to where this something this severe won't happen again when it comes to wildfires. And I don't know what that is, but hopefully that will change. And again, for all of you who have been affected by this or know people who are affected by it, we've been thinking of you quite frequently, actually, especially myself coming from California, and having, been through that area many times. Just hope that things get cleaned up quickly, that there's no more loss of life, and that the fires can be put out and they can move forward and start rebuilding again. So
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
So, but anyways, yes. So we are now on Star Trek Voyager's pilot episode, Caretaker. We have gone from TOS to TNG. We've gone to the station at D Space Nine. And now we are jumping on board an Intrepid class ship and going along with the crew into the Delta Quadrant in Star Trek Voyager's Caretaker.
That's right. You know what's interesting, like going through these pilots, is each pilot has its own like unique look, unique feel, and kind of this word is, I know this word I'm gonna say is overused, but it's like a zeitgeist of the times, like each
Oh,
like
what?
zeitgeist.
If
Like
this isn't overused, I've never heard of that word before. Please
it's like
explain to me and maybe others who might be smarter than me, but maybe not. I don't know what that means.
it's like something that represents the time that it takes place. So like something that may represent like the 90s or the 80s or like the 60s. Like so uh when DS9 like came out, it very much had that representative look of kind of the you're in the 90s and this is a 90s like science fiction
Okay.
show. And so
Yeah. So it's
yeah,
representative of its era.
yeah,
Yeah,
representative of
that
the
makes
era.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of and I know we haven't gone forward to Discovery yet, but it's going to have this own like different feel, different look, different vibe, right? So, um, yeah,
And
it's been
yeah, and if you
interesting.
think about it, Chris, so we're gonna do Enterprise next after this broken bow. Um,
Hmm.
and then we'll be on to Discovery.
Yeah,
So 2 episodes from now, we'll be talking about Discovery for the very first time on this podcast, which is going to be fascinating. There's going to be a lot to unpack there. We have a lot of thoughts and feelings about that. But what I have really, really loved about doing this particular spotlight series, and again, we've done other ones in the past to include the Mirror Universe. Um, excuse me. What I love about doing this is that you get to go back to the very beginning, right? We've both watched through all of these series before, and typically when you're watching a series and you watch through it and you finish it, right? Unless you're going to go back and rewatch the whole series from the beginning, you might pick up episodes here and there. And we've done a few Voyager episodes, right? A couple deep dives. We did the Haunting of Deck 12 as part of our Halloween series that you can find
yeah,
on the YouTube channel and podcast platforms. We did Year of Hell Part 1 and 2, which was a somewhat early deep dive where we started going back and deep diving individual episodes. And we love that. In fact, we had several members of our audience who specifically requested us to do Year of Hell Part 1 and
yeah,
2. And that was amazing. I loved that deep dive that you and I did together on that
yeah,
episode and the discussion of time and decisions and regret and everything. It was wonderful. And then we briefly mentioned the episode. I think it was called, was it one? The episode where Seven and the Doctor are the only ones awake on the ship as the
yeah,
ship's going through. But we didn't deep dive that episode, but we mentioned it, I believe, as like one of our spooky episodes to watch at Halloween time. So we've done a few Voyager episodes, and we've looked over across a series. So it's great to go back and look at the pilot, knowing what we know, having seen the entire series.
yeah. It is, and we both love the entire series. We think it's great. I mean, it was groundbreaking in a lot of ways where it had a lot. I think Voyager had the most two-parters, where each of these two-parters could be like similar, like to a movie, really.
Yeah.
And then Voyager took things in a complete different direction, right? Because they're no longer in the Alpha Quadrant, they're in the Delta Quadrant, so they have this chance to create kind of their own domain there, and they really advanced the Borg. The Borg were in the Delta Quadrant, so they did a lot to advance the Borg there, so which was really cool.
They
Uh,
really did. I'm glad you brought that up because that's a really important piece to that. I mean, not only do you have a former Borg character become a
Mhm.
main character on a series for the first time. And I'm not counting Locutus because Picard was already the captain before he became Locutus. But for the first time, you have that happen. Um, that was really important. And then, of course, just this whole idea of the Federation and the Borg teaming up
Mhm.
to fight a significantly superior species as far as technology goes in species 8472.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty cool. And that species 8472 is awesome. That was a
Oh
good
my
idea.
gosh.
Good idea
Yeah.
they had with those. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love the fact that they rescued the Borg kids and brought them on. I thought
Mhm.
that was a neat um, addition because here you have a ship stranded way away from the Federation. There's no kids on board, and then all of a sudden, well, other than Naomi, right? But
Yeah.
they bring kids on board, and then you have a child birth, which I think the only time I remember another childbirth really being forefront in Star Trek was when Keiko had Molly, or
Yeah.
Miles and Keiko had Molly O'Brien, and that was in TNG. She was born in TNG. Um, and in this particular show, you have Naomi um,
Wildman. Nomi Wildman.
Wildman,
Yeah.
yeah, born, and then you also have the Borg kids that are brought on. So I like that they bring different age characters to the series.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up the Borg kids and the Borg, teens. Not to go on too much of a tangent, but one of the things I did not like about Picard was that I'm gonna forget his name, but one of the older Borg teenage boys, I want to say his name's Icheb, but I don't think that's
Yeah.
the right.
Ichib was a character in Voyager. Yeah, I don't remember if that character was utilized in Picard or not. It's been a while since I've watched. In
Yeah.
fact, I don't think I haven't watched Picard season 3 since we watched it the first time. I haven't gone through
Okay.
back and watched it again.
Yeah, but I know that one of the boys, Borg boys, in Picard, when he's mentioned in Picard, it's like, oh yeah, he died, and I did not like that, and I don't
Hmm.
remember what season of Picard it was. I have to go back and see Picard.
It was probably season 3, and it might have been Ichib, and he was
Mm,
a character on Voyager. If I remember correctly, because I think we discussed that was an Easter egg from Voyager in the
yeah,
series, or one of several. But
yeah, because there was so much development that happened with them in Voyager to make them human, So yeah.
yeah, there really was, and I like that aspect of the characters. I like the fact they developed them, they brought them on, and they utilized the characters. They didn't just bring them on for an episode and then it's like, oh yeah, they're on the ship, but you never see or hear from them,
Yeah,
which I thought was really
exactly.
important. So, yeah, this series to me, you're right, Chris. You mentioned it perfectly. It was groundbreaking, a lot of new elements. Because Voyager went into a completely different quadrant in the galaxy, which there had only been a couple of brief mentions. And I think when Q flung the Enterprise into, I believe it was the Delta Quadrant, right?
Hmm.
In Q Who, which is the first time we meet the Borg, that's an appearance, but they're not there very long. The Delta Quadrant pretty much is unused in Star Trek until Voyager. And what I love about it is instead of making another Star Trek series about another Federation ship that's just flying around, they're doing things and going to a new planet, they throw Voyager all the way into such a deep part of the galaxy where they have to try and get home. It allows them to create new characters, new species, and a whole adventure, which we can talk about the music of Voyager at some point too, because we discussed how much we love
Hmm.
the opening credits of Voyager. But I really loved how they did that. And that really opened the door for so many amazing things that they did in this series.
Yeah, it did. I agree. And I think it was absolutely the right move to make it so different, to go into a different quadrant, because at the conclusion of DS9 or the DS9 arc, they had wrapped in so many DS9 had wrapped in so many great things about how the different species were getting along in the Alpha Quadrant. I mean, they wrapped in politics with the Romulans, with the Klingons, with the Cardassians, with the humans, with the Federation, with everything. So it was really, really interwoven. So it just made it was just so much better that DS9 didn't have to didn't have to integrate with that because it would have been difficult to integrate with that.
Yeah,
Just
that's
go
true.
off and do something like completely different, and they have the
Yeah,
freedom to do that. Yeah.
that is true. I like they did that because you have to think DS9 first appeared in 1993. That was the premiere episode, which we
Mm.
already discussed. Emissary, you can find that everywhere you get your podcast and on our YouTube channel. This series premiered in January of 1995, so just barely over 2 years later, like 2 years and a couple weeks. I mean, they're both
Mhm.
aired in January. Uh, the first episode, the pilot here, we're talking about Caretaker, was teleplayed by Michael Piller and Jerry Taylor, who we unfortunately lost recently. The story was written by Rick Berman, Michael Piller, and Jerry Taylor. And you and I both got an opportunity to meet Jerry Taylor at your first Star Trek convention back in 2021, I believe it was. And it was awesome meeting her because she mentioned something in her panel about how she kind of felt like the mom of Janeway.
She did, yeah. Janeway was a very personal character for her, and she cared very much for that character. So uh, anything that had to do with Janeway's personality, Janeway's pivotal decisions, um, I know she felt like she needed to have like a part in that. You know,
Yeah.
she cared very much about that.
Yeah, she mentioned the significant role she played in the development of Janeway
Mhm.
and all that went into that. So we have to obviously thank her. It was wonderful. She was such a wonderful lady, so nice. And I'm glad we had a chance to meet her after the panel they did in Vegas for the Star Trek convention a few years ago. We would
Yeah.
also be remiss if we did not mention that as of the time of this recording, January 19th here, uh, that 30 years ago and 3 days now
Hmm.
was the premiere of Star Trek Voyager's Caretaker and the premiere of this series. So this year, 2025, is the 30th anniversary that we were celebrating of Voyager, Chris. And how ironic and coincidental, maybe not, that we just so happened to be getting to Voyager's Caretaker episode 3 days after the 30th anniversary of the series.
Yeah, isn't it? Yeah, I thought that was cool. It was serendipitous that occurred for us to be, talking about, yeah, that happened to be we arrived at this pilot episode for Voyager at the same time that Voyager was like being premiered around the world. So cool. And it doesn't seem like it was 30 years, but I guess it was 30
I,
years, yeah.
I didn't want to say anything, but we we keep talking about these series,
Yeah.
and it seems like every time we talk about a series, there's a new anniversary, and each anniversary keeps getting larger and larger, and it makes keeps making me feel older and older. Like, how has it been 30 years since Voyager premiered? I mean, Voyager is the fourth series in the Star Trek franchise, not counting Star Trek the animated series. This is the fourth series in the Star Trek franchise, and it's 30 years old now.
Hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't feel like that.
No, does not at all.
We've talked a lot about time recently, Chris.
Yeah, we have.
With Star Trek Generations, we talked about The Visitor on the Where's Beverly podcast, which you can find that episode that we were on with them everywhere you get your podcasts. So be sure to go check out their show for our appearance on that. And that was wonderful talking about The Visitor with them.
Was.
And here we are talking about time again and the fact that it's 30 years ago that this series premiered.
Yeah. I love that these are I don't have Voyager on DVD or Blu-ray. I don't have any hard copies of Voyager. Someday I'd like to get that because I think that'd be special to have. But I do really love that these are on streaming for like everyone to be able to enjoy and to go back and see if they never
Yeah.
seen Voyager. So it's
I
good.
I had these on DVD a long time ago. I bought these many, many, many years ago at one of my earliest conventions I went to. They had a table where the Roddenberry team had a table where they were selling this DVD sets, the different
Hmm.
series. And for whatever reason, Voyager seemed to be the hardest one to find as far as the DVD sets go.
Yeah.
So mind you, you have 7 seasons with all these episodes, which is a lot of discs. Chris, I think I paid like $300 for that DVD set back then.
I can believe that.
They
Yeah, they
were
were expensive.
expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because DVDs were still, that was the thing. Right? They were still
Yeah.
kind of, sort of like new-ish.
Yeah, they
They
were.
weren't like new, but that was the way in which you watch shows. There wasn't streaming services back then.
And the DVDs had these beautiful like opening menus. Like they could create these really ornate, like really cool
Yeah.
like menus you could navigate in and play the episodes. That was kind of an art form in itself with those menus.
Yeah, that's actually a good way of putting it because they did and they do. I don't have Paramount Plus right now because I didn't haven't had a reason to have it. I'm not really watching anything on it other than like Star Trek episodes, which I have. So I pulled out my DVD from season one of Voyager and put it in, and that reminded me because I the menus pop up and it's these
Yeah.
and it has the Voyager theme song in the background of the menu as you're selecting what you want to watch, and yeah, it's pretty killer. It's pretty awesome.
Okay, I think that is so cool that yeah, you pulled out your DVD to watch the pilot of Voyager. That's authentic, man. That's
It,
authentic, bro.
it's retro, man. It's retro. But yes, it is. I there's something about I don't know, Chris. I like there's just certain things that I like having the hard copy media of the
Yeah.
DVD or the Blu-ray or the 4K. And it's you can't really find stores. They don't really sell a lot of them anymore. I mean, Walmart still sells them, but Target doesn't really sell much anymore. You can get stuff off of Amazon, but in general, you just go to a lot of Best Buy doesn't sell anything anymore, really media related as far as movies go. So it's hard to find that stuff now unless you go to one of those stores that sells all the old videos and stuff, which we have around here, and that's nice because you can go back. I think we've had conversations about me
Yeah.
going to the that store and buying all the old Jean-Claude Van Damme movies on DVD, which has been amazing finding those different ones. But anyway, that's a whole I've kind of rabbit trailed this year on the whole DVD thing.
All
But
good.
so going back to Caretaker, this episode was directed by Winrick Colby, I think's how you say his name,
Mm.
on this particular one. And yeah, let's jump into this, Chris. Let's get going. Let's talk about Star Trek Voyager's Caretaker.
Yeah, this one opens with another text crawl, which was neat. And this stood out to us like immediately because we had just watched the DS9 pilot, which had a text crawl, and thus this one has one too. So the text crawl here that opens with Voyager is unhappy with the new treaty. Federation colonists along the Cardassian border have banded together. Calling themselves the Maquis, they continue to fight the Cardassians. Some consider them heroes, but to the governments of the Federation and Cardassia, they are outlaws. So that kind of sets the stage, right, on where
Yeah.
we are. And we kind of know that, yeah, the Federation is in this place. And the opening shot that we have is of Chakotay, right? He's on a ship. He's being chased by a Cardassian ship.
Not the
And
Kardashians.
yeah,
That's
and
right. All of a
yes,
sudden, you see the ship, and Kim Kardashian pops her head up and goes, "I will get you, Chakotay."
that's right. That's right. So he's being chased and he's trying to outmaneuver, outrun them. You see Balana Torres is also the co-pilot, and Tuvok is back there, I think, manning the weapons station as they're running from the Cardassian ship. And yeah, and they're making their way, trying to get to the Badlands so that the Cardassian ship can't find them. They're able to get away and lose the Cardassian ship in the Badlands because the Cardassian ship gets hit by a plasma uh piece of plasma that comes out to get them. But soon after that, some sort of like energy wave like comes and overtakes them. And so that's the thing. They're like, oh, this energy wave is going to take them in like 5 seconds, and it comes and it gets them, and they're not sure what it is.
Yeah.
And then you cut, I think, soon after, and then you've got the opening credits of Voyager, and the first time you hear the music of Voyager, which is beautiful there.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So a couple thoughts here that I had when this opening scene here, outside of the crawl, which you mentioned,
yeah,
which I liked. Like you mentioned, this whole each pilot is very fitting for its era because if that's the era it's in, right? So this is very 90s, which I
yeah,
love. 80s and 90s sci-fi to me is just amazing.
it's awesome.
It's fantastic. There's some amazing 70s stuff too, but 80s and 90s to me is really where it was at when it comes to, some of the best sci-fi ever made. So a couple things that stood out here to me. First of all, You have another Star Trek series that is taking familiarity from the previous series, right? The Cardassians are a very, very integral part, very large part of D Space Nine. You have a spacecraft that I believe the Maquis Raider, I think is what they're called, first is introduced in D Space Nine. You have the Cardassian Gaylor class ship was I do not believe first was introduced in D Space Nine. I believe those TNG
Hmm.
the same design of DS9 that they're in TNG. Gol Evek was a Cardassian character in D Space Nine. So that's also a
Okay.
carryover from D Space Nine into Voyager. And so we've talked about this in the other pilots, right, Chris? How each well, TOS didn't do this. TNG did this slightly with bringing Dr. McCoy and it's a very old Dr. McCoy and stuff in. DS9 brings in Captain Picard and the Enterprise at the very beginning, and the whole Locutus and Wolf 359, something that's very familiar because of the powerful two-part episode Best of Both Worlds that ended season 3 and began season 4. Now Voyager's bringing in Deep Space Nine and elements of Deep Space Nine, and I guess some TNG too, into its series to kick it off and bring familiarity in, so that I think Star Trek fans who have watched those go, okay, I recognize this, I get this, I'm buying in. I'm diving into this series, and I know something, so I'm not just completely lost. I think that's important. I love that they did that to give people comfort and familiarity as they're throwing all of these new things, new ships, new characters, new species, all at your face right away in the pilot.
Sure, you have some overlap, which is great, and it's also a sense of a little bit of baton that comes from episode to episode. Although they're airing at the same time,
Yep.
which is okay too. But the overlap is important, and establishing that Voyager is in that world, is in the universe, and establishing that familiarity is good. Just like, and we'll talk about it when we get there. But even in Star Trek Enterprise or Enterprise, at the pilot of the Enterprise, you have a Klingon warrior at the very beginning, right? So
Yep.
you're like, and it's um that era of the Klingon warrior is the one we're familiar with. So
Yeah.
yeah, so absolutely, it was an important like technique and good to do.
Yeah, continuity I think is really big
Mhm.
here, right? The
Yeah.
continuity that they have throughout the series because it ties the franchise together, right? You have different series that are happening, in different eras of Star Trek. Yes, there's overlap between TNG, DS9, and Voyager, but you're bringing them together. You're providing that continuity amongst the timeline and with characters and seeing how all of this integrates in and ties in together. I think that's really great.
Yep. Yep. It sure is. So shortly, excuse me, shortly after that, we get to go to New Zealand. Apparently, that's where they have penal colonies,
At least one of them,
Federation colonies.
anyways. Yeah.
Yeah.
What a beautiful place too. I mean,
Ah.
if you're in a Cardassian work camp or penal colony, it ain't looking like that.
It's not. It's not. But that's where we get to be introduced to Mr. Tom Paris. And we get to, this is our first introduction to Captain Janeway. Because she has come to ask Mr. Paris to join her crew so that she can look for that lost Maquis ship and get her security officer Tuvok back.
Did you like how they you see what you learn as Paris working on that thing, and all of a sudden you hear her voice, and the camera pans up slowly, and there she is standing up above you in this position of strength, this position of power. She has the high ground like Obi-Wan in this case, right? But I love that shot that they chose to do where you're looking up to her. In fact, she's the captain, and that introduction that she gets in the first moments on screen, I thought was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, that was great. And her hands on her hips. I believe her hands on her were on her hips, and she was very authoritative as that first like opening
Yeah.
shot. Yep.
And
And
that
we
camera angle gives you that feeling of that authoritativeness.
yeah, it does. Yep. And she's in her uniform and it's great. And it's great. And you get the later shots with Tom Paris and Janeway walking around the penal colony. He's actually quite a bit taller than her. If you get those kind of distant shots, you can see the height difference, which was interesting to see. Um, but yeah, she's able to convince him to come on and go with her. But he's such a this was a good intro to Tom because he's just such I can't even think of the right word to describe his personality. But
Yeah. This is the first time I can think of where a main character on a Star Trek series is introduced as a prisoner or inmate. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
we meet Tom Paris. Now he was in Starfleet before, but we meet him, and the moment at the time at which we meet him, he is a prisoner. He is part of the Federation penal colony. And to take him to becoming a main character and an integral part of the crew moving forward, that's the first time I can think of that ever being done on Star Trek, let alone a captain going to a penal colony to recruit someone to go on a mission with her. That particular moment there was a huge first for Star Trek.
Yeah. And he's actually kind of at the beginning of this episode, he's to me, he was kind of unlikable.
Yeah.
You know, he just
Yeah.
really had an attitude about him. And like when they're going to um when Tom Paris is actually he's in a shuttlecraft and he's going near DS9, and he's being introduced to the ship, the Voyager, and that's the first time you get to see this beautiful shot of the Voyager. And I think it's like Lieutenant Stani is her name. She's a
Yeah.
Betazoid, and she's telling him about the ship, which I thought was really, really cool. And you get to see like some nice shots of the ship. But there's this interaction with Tom Paris and Stani, and I watched that a couple times actually, and I thought, she could she could like slap this like harassment like complaint against Tom Paris because
Right?
that's how he was, right? So
Yeah,
yeah,
he was. I don't want to say he was creeping on her, but he was very
yeah,
forthcoming. I love the dialogue too, where she's like, "Do you always come at women at warp speed or whatever?" And he's like, "Only if they're in visual range." It's like, so
yeah,
he's cheesy. He's very like forthcoming. I don't know if it's because he was at a penal colony or what it was, but yeah, he's very much. They made the character very unlikable in the beginning. Now, that being said, Tom Paris is my favorite character in Voyager, and
mm,
I love one of many reasons is because I love the arc that they gave him, where they bring him from this moment in Caretaker, where he's this very unlikable
mhm,
kind of little sleazy or kind of gross dude who's coming on to the first woman he sees or one of the first women he sees, and they bring him from that moment forward to being just this observer, using air quotes, on board the ship, to
mhm,
becoming a member of the crew, the best pilot on the ship, all these things. And he has marries B'Elanna, and in the series finale, they have their kid who's born right as they're, you know, right as they're getting ready to enter Earth, enter Earth's orbit. All this stuff. I just love what they did with the character. I really did. This, he had father son relationship issues with his dad, who was an admiral. And that
yeah,
was mentioned in here, right? How
yeah,
someone says, "Well, isn't your dad an admiral? Like, isn't that kind of embarrassing or whatever?" And he's like, "Yeah, I don't know if it's more embarrassing for him or me or whatever the lines are." Yeah, he's my favorite character. So I love seeing this because you see, as we go back in the pilot, you see how, how wild and weird this character is to where he gets to is wonderful.
yeah. Oh, that's cool. I didn't realize he was your favorite character.
He is. Yep.
Yeah, he had um so he was in TNG too,
He was, but not as
right?
Tom Paris.
Not as Tom Paris, but like as the cadet leader, I think of the that elite kind of cadet flying squad. So yeah, it
Yeah.
was really good that him, not his character because a different
Yeah.
character, but really good that he could be in Voyager.
That TNG episode was that First Duty? That's the one where they have that accident, right? Wesley's involved and Picard's there, and it's that very disappointed dad, but the fact they were trying to cover things up
Yeah.
a little bit and they lied and all that. But yeah, that'd be an interesting episode to talk about too sometime, with just the all the shady stuff that these cadets go through. And Picard's trying to kind of have their back, and then he finds out Wesley lies, and he's just this just almost angry father type. Anyways, it's a
Yeah. No, Picard
rabbit
has a.
trail, but
Oh, it's
yeah,
okay. Picard has a great speech to Wesley. I remember that. Great one.
yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, but yeah, you
Yeah.
are right. He is in that TNG episode as a different character.
Yeah. It's good. We get to see Quark on the station, which was great, right? You get to see Quark's interaction with Harry Kim, and Harry is very, very naive and saying, "Oh, hey,
Gosh.
Starfleet's warned us about you, Ferengi," which is Quark takes that and uses it to his advantage, which is great. Trying
Yeah.
to, yeah, scam Harry Kim there. So
Oh my gosh. I remember the interaction between the two. Remember, Quark is the only DS9 character to appear in this episode, I
yeah,
believe, right?
yeah.
I love the way that Quark tries to scam Kim. He realizes it's all you can see it on Kim's face, this very raw, like just new ensign he hasn't been out, he hasn't done anything. Quark can read that from a mile away. He is so, I guess, I don't know what the right term is. Raw, green, like just new,
Mhm.
almost like he still has that new ensign smell to him. And Quark hones in on that and then takes what Kim says and tries to almost make it sound like Kim is using some type of like racial slur against the
Mhm.
Ferengi and just has this huge blow up. And then Paris comes over and saves him, be like, you can get these anywhere. Like,
Yeah.
and Quark's like, well, we were just about to do this transaction, and his whole tone changes. That whole scene just made me laugh hysterically.
Yeah, that was a good one. That was a good one. So you could get like Kim's just very, very fresh and kind of naive look at like
Yeah.
everything. Like because as you learn later in the episode, I think um he says a line to Balana. This is later when they're trying to get out of the underground subterranean like Ocampa part. He goes, all my life, like I've done everything I can to get into Starfleet, and then my first mission, I'm gonna die. And that and but all I don't Balana says Balana helps him out of it.
Yeah.
He's kind of being dramatic there, but
Yeah.
yeah, it was good. But
I mean,
yeah,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, yeah. No, no, no. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think Garrett Wong plays this role so well in this pilot. He really did a wonderful job of honing in on the way the character would be responding to these very unique circumstances, given how he's so fresh out of the academy, right?
Hmm.
That he doesn't have any type of experience. And so the way in which everything is just this dramaticness to it, I thought was just wonderfully done.
Well, yeah. So when his first meeting with the captain, so he and Tom Paris like go into the captain's ready room to give their respects to the captain, and you see him stand like at this complete stiff attention posture,
Yeah.
which is great. And she says, oh, stop that before you sprain yourself, before you
Yeah.
sprain something. So I like that.
I love that line. There are some really good comedic moments in this first episode. And I'm thinking back to the TOS two pilots that we talked about.
Yeah.
TNG's Encounter at Farpoint certainly had some funny moments. I don't really remember many funny moments in TOS or DS9, especially DS9. DS9 was a very serious pilot.
Hmm.
TOS, I don't really remember too much other than maybe Where No Man Has Gone Before, where there was maybe a couple of comedic lines between Kirk and Spock, but in general was pretty serious. But this episode, I like the fact that they have some light moments mixed in.
Yeah. Some interplay, which is great. And you'll definitely get light moments when you've got Quark in there, and with the just the doctor's personality when the
Oh my
when the
gosh,
holographic doctor comes online. So
the
yeah,
bedside manner or lack thereof.
yeah, lack thereof. So which is great. Yeah,
Oh, by the way, okay,
yeah.
so when Paris is on the shuttle, right, and he's creeping on the lieutenant,
He's so creeping.
yeah,
Yeah,
it really is. He really
yeah,
is, especially the over the shoulder, like, hey,
yeah.
but the moment where the ship is introduced for the first time and you see it docked
Yeah.
at that beautiful station that is Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
But, but besides that, but I love that shot, how they're flying that shuttle and they're flying in the station, and then all of a sudden the Intrepid comes out. I don't know. These pilot episodes have done a wonderful job of introducing these ships so beautifully, like they're a character, because that's what they are. The ships are a character in these series.
They are. And you see the serial number of the ship. And I'm sorry. I I I had the serial number memorized and now I forgot it. But you saw
74656, I believe is what it was.
yeah, thank you. The NCC
Yeah.
74656. So cool. Yeah.
Oh yeah, when they fly over the front of the ship, and yeah,
Yeah.
it's really neat. I think that that is important because the producers and creators of each of the series obviously were very intentional with the way in which they're introducing the
Hmm.
ship for the first time. Because if it was just a, oh, there's a ship shot and then that, but the way, and even the director, the way in which they bring the ship in and the camera angles and the pan ups and the downs and everything else really adds that artistic touch to it that I think makes it so much more impactful and much more beautiful, because they really are treating each of the ships, or in DS9's case, the station and so forth, with care and respect and dignity.
And the design of the ship is beautiful and you can totally it fits. It fits within that the world fits within the universe. It goes like, yeah, this is definitely its own kind of ship that would be right along a galaxy class ship, or a Stargazer class ship. So it's really, really great.
And it's interesting too, because with TOS, you had a smaller crew complement. You bring in the Enterprise D, it has a massive crew complement. DS9 was different because it was a station, but there was a lot of people on the station. Voyager's smaller though too. I think what they said, the crew complement was like 170 something.
I think, yeah, 151.
Oh, 151. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a small crew size. It's not
Mhm.
a that ship was not built for to have bring families on like a Galaxy class was. This is an exploration vessel. This is a ship that's meant to go out on these deep space missions, and it's powerful, it packs a punch, it's got the folding nacelles. I mean, all these things were not designed to be a family centric ship.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
Be kind of cool to explore which kind of ship we would want to be a captain of
Yeah,
later.
I have a few ideas. There are some ships. I love the Akira class ship that was introduced
Yeah.
in First Contact. Really like that a lot. Yeah, that would be interesting to explore that sometime. Like what type of ship that we would want to, either be posted on, or be a captain of. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So they do have a nice like sequence of them leaving the DS9 port and then going to the Badlands, I think shortly after that to try and look for the lost Maquis ship. So you got to see Janeway say engage. Oh, and you got to see Paris meet the first officer and the doctor and all of that interaction.
Yeah, that first officer's life wasn't long lived in this series, was
It
it?
was not. First officer and the doctor, like their shortest, like, yep, shortest
Yeah.
career.
So in Voyager's Caretaker, we do have a red shirt that dies, but it's the first officer, right?
This is the first officer.
Not normal for a series to have a first officer die and then have a new first officer in a pilot
Yeah.
episode.
Yeah.
Very, very unique in that regard, I would say.
Um, Regarding Chakotay, wasn't there a line saying that Chakotay was a first officer on forget the name of the ship, but was a first officer of another Federation ship before he left service?
I
Did that
believe
say that?
so. I
Yeah.
believe so. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Also fascinating too, Chris, that, and this is a little bit of a gripe I have with the series as a whole.
Yeah.
So you have Janeway in her ready room I believe before they leave DS9, talking to her fiance, Mr.
Oh,
Mark
yeah.
Johnson, and
Yeah.
talking about her dog that's ready to have puppies.
Hmm.
And, you don't forget to go get her bed from my house, and I already did that, and all this, and this interaction and how much you could tell she loved him. And then he says, is this another love me, love my dog demand? Which she says yes. And when she says, you never bother me except he says, oh, I'm not gonna bother you or whatever. And she says, you never bother me except the way I love to be bothered. Understand? And this little interplay. And then you really never hear about him the whole rest of the series. Like you have this fiance and you pretty much have just kind of, I mean, you can't talk to him for most of the series, but like you just forget about him. You're like, well, we got to get home. Maybe it's the fact that she thinks it's going to take 70 plus years and he may not be alive. I don't know. But it's just weird to me that that was such a, like they included that in the pilot, but then the rest of the series, there's not even, maybe even early on, at least some type of like, oh, I miss Mark, and I wonder what he's doing, something. But I guess maybe because she's so focused on her crew and trying to get home and fending off the next alien that's going to try to blow their ship up, that it just never comes up. But did that ever come up to you, that this idea that she's just so dismissive of her fiance and her dog and all that back home?
Yes, it actually did. Um, I, I want to say maybe it's mentioned, maybe it's mentioned like once throughout the series when they're in the
But
Delta
not
Quadrant.
enough.
No, um, but particularly like because I mean, she is close to having a romance with Chakotay.
Yep.
There's at least one like alien um leader that she has a romance with later, or
Yep.
like so it's kind of weird.
Well, then there's the hologram, the
Hologram, yeah.
Irish hologram that she kind of has a thing for.
Mm-hmm.
There's the novel she plays out on the holodeck where she's this female character and she kind of has a thing for the dude. I don't remember the name. Yeah, it's just strange to me that like if I was in her shoes and I had a fiance, I would be thinking about her all the time. And I'm not saying that they needed to mention him all the time, but a little bit more, especially in the beginning. Maybe as the series goes on, they think she's thinking, well, I might never see him again and so forth. But maybe in the first couple seasons, you have some mentions of him, and then I wonder how my dog is, or I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking too much into it, but that's something that always kind of irked me a little bit.
Well, no, I don't think you were overthinking it. I mean, I had thought about it too. Even like Q comes in later seasons of Voyager and wants Janeway to be, let's see, I think the mom of his child, something like
Yeah,
that.
something
Yeah,
weird. Yeah.
yeah, he really likes like Janeway. Um, yeah. Or was Mark her fiance? Can't
Yes.
remember. Oh
Yeah,
wow.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, wow, wow.
So that's another thing, Chris. You bring up Q. It's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
I, tell me what you think about this. I felt like Q in Voyager, Q was forced into the series. I don't think it felt natural that he would just randomly appear at the ship in the Delta Quadrant. It just
Oh.
felt very clunky in Voyager, his appearances. Not that he played the character bad or anything, or that the actors played their roles poorly, but it just felt the story and the way in which they just throw him into Voyager because, oh well, he was in DS9 for one episode and he had all those episodes in TNG,
Mm-hmm.
and it was something familiar, which just because it's familiar doesn't mean it's right, in my opinion. They've done a lot of things with familiar from other series that worked. I just never felt like Q fit in Voyager the way he did. I mean, he was only in one episode of DS9, but the way he did in like TNG, for example.
Yeah. Um, I didn't mind Q as much, I think, in Voyager as perhaps you, like, because I think he did I mean, it definitely he always feels at home in the TNG kind of universe, right?
Yeah.
And that's where he is. Um, Having him kind of appear like he did randomly in Voyager was okay to me. I didn't because they kind of advanced Q's stories a little bit. Is this the one where Q? Well, there's I think a couple. But Voyager is where doesn't Q want to die in one of the Voyager episodes?
There is
Um,
a Q that wants to,
there is an AQ
yes.
that wants to die. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I believe it's the same Q that asks for asylum on board
Mm,
Voyager from the
yeah.
Continuum.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of Q episodes, I think, a couple of Q episodes. It just never felt like it really fit. I almost felt like it's like, oh, we're gonna take this popular character from TNG and we're gonna throw it in Voyager.
Yeah, I can understand that.
It just didn't feel, I don't know, didn't feel right to me.
Oh yeah, I can totally understand that. Totally understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So Voyager gets hit by that same energy wave that the Maquis like Raider gets hit by, and they're thrown and they're kind of the ship's damaged as well. They're thrown 70,000 light years into the Delta Quadrant, and much of the ship's like senior officers are killed throughout that result.
Yeah.
The doctor, first officer, Stani, the helmsman, yeah, they're all gone.
Wild that they would do that with me with main bridge character. So just, oh yeah, he's dead. Yep, he's dead. Yep, she's dead. You know, like just this almost willy-nilly way of doing it. But then again, at the
Yeah,
same time, when you look at the fact that they're bringing in Paris and Tuvok and Chakotay, it kind of makes sense because you have to have a place for those main characters to be.
yeah,
And you know, you look at Star Trek series, main characters pretty much spend most of their time on the bridge. I know you have Beverly in sick bay and you have Geordi in engineering, but in general, most of the main characters typically spend a lot of their time on the bridge.
yeah, they do. And this definitely brought a sense of drama, um, and like imminent danger into the pilot, which was good for them,
Yeah.
to figure out and do. So that was good. Um,
Hmm.
yeah. And they are soon, let's see. Let's see, they're soon able to get the emergency doctor, emergency hologram doctor back online, or online for the first time. And um, so you have the great interaction with him, and he's doing his initial treatments of the crew, which were great. And you get the early taste of his personality, which was really really good. And that's his personality. I like how they kind of keep that like consistent throughout the show.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like the Doctor in this series. He comes a long way from this episode. And I mean, every character does in pilots to the end. They have their arcs and they change, of course. But he's an afterthought. He is just an emergency doctor, a hologram. And for him to become not only a main character, but for him to then grow and change and become literally part of the crew like another just any other member. He's able to move around with the mobile holo emitter. He studies opera. He does he teaches Seven how to practice dating coming from
Hmm.
a hologram. I mean, it's just some very ironic situations in which the Doctor is in with other characters and the way in which he goes about doing things. It just makes the arc that they give him that much more important and special.
Yeah, it does. It does. So soon after they realize that there's this huge array in front of them. They don't know what it is. They beam onto the array, and it's just this felt really really Star Trek to me, which was okay. But when they beam onto the array, and it's like they're beaming onto this like country meadow, and this farmland, and they're met by farmers essentially. Like if they're at a picnic, um and they're all confused of course, but they're wondering what this all is, and they do realize like it's a hologram, but it is kind of it felt very 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 Star Trek. Like you go to this really unusual like situation, and the farmers are just saying, hey, it's all right, just come have some corn with us and wait here.
Who wants some corn? Corn on the
Yeah.
cob.
Yeah. So they're trying to figure that out as they go
Yeah,
along.
yeah, very strange. And we can talk more about this at the end, but I found this part of the episode just very bizarre. Like just in some
Mhm.
instances, very okay. I'm gonna say this is a pun intended. This was very corny.
Yeah.
Um,
Was an odd choice, wasn't it? I mean,
yeah. I mean, I get it, right? So the caretaker is attempting to put them in a situation that makes them feel comfortable, which I guess they thought a southerner farmhouse, farmland thing was what made the most sense given their scans of the humans and their ship and all this stuff. But
mhm.
it just felt out of place, felt clunky at this part of the episode. I get what they're trying to do with the caretaker. But it just didn't feel, I don't know, it just didn't feel like it
No,
flowed. It didn't feel good that good.
yeah, I get it. I mean, you kind of, I'm gonna jump around a little bit, but the caretaker, I mean, the title of this episode, of this pilot episode, is the caretaker.
Yeah.
And so the caretaker, like one of the forms of him, at least the holographic form, is the old man playing the banjo.
Yep.
And then later at the end of the episode, um, it's that kind of gelatinous like creature once they've kind of unveiled all of the hologram stuff has gone away. But I feel the same. I thought, I maybe wanted more from that. I mean, this is the entity that brought them here to the Quadrant, essentially like kidnapping like everyone from around the galaxy,
Yeah.
right? That's what he was doing. I wanted a little more. Like now,
Yeah.
now that I'm thinking about the pilot. Yeah, so I thought, yeah, I definitely wanted more from the caretaker. It just didn't feel like maybe the presence of him in the episode wasn't enough, or there could have been more to make me like feel it. I mean, his whole purpose of staying there to jump around a little bit was because like he felt guilty about affecting the Ocampa homeworld planet and affecting their atmosphere, and so therefore like they stayed that long. Um, it was just like odd, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. If we look back so far, Chris, on the pilot episodes, I'm trying to think between TOS, TNG, and DS9 if any of the other pilots had a quote unquote villain of the episode that just didn't feel like it was that menacing or that I don't really know what the exact word is. It's almost like, okay, you have this caretaker who is bringing other species from around the galaxy in, kidnapping them, like you said. And he has this guilt for messing up the Ocampa planet. And then so, okay, now I got to take care of them and everything else. I don't know. I just, like maybe this storyline might have been good for a one-off episode, but as a
Mhm.
pilot, I'm just like, maybe there could have been something better.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. The idea was good, um, but for him as a character, I thought could have been like a lot stronger. Like, in Toss, we had a Gary Mitchell, which I thought was very, very strong. In TNG, you had a Q. In DS9, you had the whole mystery of what was happening with the prophets and the wormhole, and you had the Cardassians like in there
Yeah.
too. So yeah, you know.
Yeah, just so I would say of the four different series
Mhm.
pilots that we've watched, I feel like the caretaker piece maybe is the weakest link so far. Um,
Yeah,
you're right on that. The idea of the caretaker was great. I think the execution of it was not.
yeah, yeah. Shortly after, like we're gonna get to some parts that I actually didn't. As I watch them, I'm not sure how much I like them because they're in this like farm holographic area, which
Yeah.
they soon discover is a holographic area, right? And then so when they discover that, one of the female form says, "Hey, I'm not ready for you yet," and I believe she punches Tom Paris.
Yeah.
Um, and then everyone else, everyone else comes to see what's happening. Um, but you have a flash, and then everyone is kind of taken, or abducted in a way.
Yeah.
They're they're flat. That some sort of medical procedure is being performed on all of them. Um, that part, like, that's always like very uncomfortable, but that part, like, I didn't like. But everyone else except for Balana and Harry are beamed back, like, onto Voyager later. And then they're kind of, once they realize it, everyone gets up and says, "Oh, how much time has elapsed?" But everyone on Voyager, now that I think about it, they're not like, they don't talk about like what procedure was done on them when they're back
Yeah.
on Voyager. None of them do.
Yeah. It's kind of clunky. And why did they remember? Do you remember them explaining why Balana and Kim were the two that were kept versus the other ones?
Yeah, and I didn't really like this explanation because it comes in a conversation between the caretaker and Captain Janeway near the end of the episode. But the caretaker explains like he was trying to find individuals that had some sort of uh, biological compatibility with him, so that in essence he could procreate and then um, have a descendant that would stay and be the next caretaker. Because he was dying, he was
Right.
trying to
Yeah,
find
yeah,
a
yeah.
replacement for him. Now, for the reason I was thinking about it, and why would it have been like Balana and Kim that kind of stayed there? It's like, well, maybe Balana was because she was half Klingon, and maybe the thing with Kim. I was thinking about this later episode in Voyager where Kim, where Harry thought he was part of this other alien race, but I don't remember if that was like it was kind of a hoax though. It might have been a
Yeah.
plant.
But it was a it was a weak reason. Like
Yeah.
he didn't give anything specific enough to me to be like, "Oh, okay, well that makes sense," kind of. It was just very, I don't know, maybe it wasn't as flushed out as it could have been. The reasoning for keeping the two of them.
Yeah. I
Um,
agree. Yeah. I mean, it served as a vehicle for Harry, Kim, and Balana to be in the subterranean part of where the Okampas were.
yeah, but Janeway takes a team down in there too after
She
they get to the
does.
planet, right? And
She does.
And Kess is there and she's all beat up and then she takes them down and they go down there too. I don't know. I mean, so the idea of the Okampa, I like the idea of the Okampa, the way they created these characters. These are characters who don't live but, 8, 9 years in human years, right? And they have to procreate when they're like 2 years old, otherwise they don't. And they're a species that is being taken care of by the caretaker, and they're so dependent on the caretaker's caring for them that they've forgotten how to think. Like, in Kess even mentioned something about how she's like, "Yeah, we've forgotten how to think and how to act, and we're so dependent on the caretaker for everything." And I like that concept, this idea that it's almost like, I'm not calling the Okampa animals, but like it's the concept where you have domesticated animals and they don't have the same ability maybe as the wild animals because they've been domesticated and they're so reliant on their owners, whereas the ones in the wild can hunt and forage and things and do that for themselves. And I know it's kind of maybe a weird comparison. That's kind of how I think of the Okampa here in this particular episode.
That was a good comparison, I think, because yeah, that was good. You get to learn a little bit about the Okampa in this episode. I mean, you get the sense that, hey, they once, before they moved subterranean, they had all of these great like abilities.
Yeah.
that they could use with their mind, and they've lost all of that. They've lost all of their knowledge.
Yeah. And that's
Uh,
important too, right? For
yeah,
the even though I know neither one of us liked the way they did it or the fact that they did it all, but like the way in which Kess kind of evolves to a higher existence and gets all these powers, and you're like, where did that come from? And then, but now going back and talking about the pilot, you remember where they said that the Ocampa at one point had these telepathic abilities and things like that that they kind of draw from as they build that character up to eventually the show.
yeah, um, yeah, absolutely. And this gets to some things that kind of bother me about the Ocampa concept. Is like, uh, so the Ocampa have a lifespan of like 8 or 9 years, but when they're in this area and you see all of these other Ocampa, um, you see you see these men that look like, these are older men, right? And I'm like,
Yeah, it's not
well,
consistent.
that's not consistent. I'm like, I guess they could have, maybe they look like they could have like aged really, really fast, but that doesn't seem right either, right? Because you've got like um just Ocampa that look like Cass that have aged their 9 years.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, maybe they, that didn't seem consistent with me. And then um they they are in the Ocampa and the Kazon are in such a conflict, right? The Kazon are trying to get the water that the Ocampa have, and I'm trying to understand this, but if the Ocampa have had in the past all of these powers, I should say, that they've lost, right? Really, if the Ocampa are able to just find the powers that they actually have biologically within themselves, the Kazon are no match for the Ocampa.
Yeah.
Yes, the Kazon have all these ships, and they're just, the Kazon have like a bad kind of attitude about everything, um but the Ocampa could actually like outpower them if they just continued to evolve like we see Kess evolve
Yeah.
later.
I I know we're talking about the pilot, but because
Yeah.
in the pilot I'm going to mention this. I think the Kazon were horrible, horrible villains
Hmm.
in this series. Like they have these big powerful ships. They have technology, but they act like buffoons. Like they act like they're not that they're like Neanderthals or something like that, but they act like they're not as advanced of a species as they try to portray. Like there's almost like this struggle to me in the writing and the way in which the Kazon are presented and used throughout early seasons of Voyager, because eventually they go away once Voyager gets far enough, towards the Alpha Quadrant. They very much play them off like they're different gangs, right? Because they have their different sects, as they call them,
Yeah.
SECTS. You have like the Nistrum and all these other ones, and they play them off like these gangs and mob bosses and stuff. They play them off like they are a not an inferior species, but that they are. You know what I'm trying to get at? They're
Yeah. Yeah.
what's the word I'm looking for? That they're just not as advanced of a species,
Yeah.
but yet their technology is really advanced. But it's just this to me this struggle between that for this species that they have introduced in Voyager, and I just never felt like they were executed well. I think there could have been potential had they done them right, but I don't think they did the species right in this show.
Yeah. I agree with you. I felt really, it didn't feel, it felt incongruent to me.
Yeah.
So when they've got Neelix and then Janeway and her landing party and Neelix, they all land on the surface of the planet and they go to this encampment, and the encampment has the K's on there. I didn't get the sense that the Kazon that were there at the encampment were just like some this really an advanced, kind of civilized and sophisticated like group of people. Um, it seemed like they were just like bandits.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like Raiders or something, right?
yeah,
Or yeah.
Um, and they, you know, they were outwitted pretty quick. They really wanted water. That was their big thing is like,
Yeah.
hey, we want water and they'll do anything for water. Um, but and yet they had these really powerful advanced ships that ultimately took out, I mean, it took out the Maquis Raider, and it gave the Voyager like a whole lot of trouble.
Yep.
Um, I just felt like, oh, that was too different, is what I felt.
Primitive was the word I was looking for
Primitive,
earlier.
yeah.
This struggle between being a primitive species and being an advanced species.
Mm-hmm.
There was this head to head clash of them. And you're right. They very much felt like bandits or outlaws or something in this episode. And then it's like they tried to change that and they kept trying to make them different throughout their appearances in the series. I don't feel like that ever got there. They were outwitted pretty easily. I mean, you think about Seska, right? She ends up leaving the ship and going to the mock to the Kazon, and it was very easy for her to outwit them and play with to them. And I don't know. Yeah, the Kazon to me were always a species I just was never a fan of, just because there was so much inconsistency, like you mentioned, in the species, and you just never know really what to think about them.
Yeah, exactly. Um, and other thing that I was thinking a lot about in this pilot that I didn't particularly like, but when I wanted to get your sense too, was so they find Neelix in this debris field, and it was a humorous like interaction when they get Neelix and they get Neelix on the ship. Water is a big deal again because
Yeah.
Neelix wants water, but Neelix says, "Hey, I'll help you um, get your people back on that planet." He he, he essentially, I guess, swindle is not quite the right word, but he uses Janeway and the Voyager to get Cass, right? To say, hey, I knew I was gonna rescue Cass, and he does. As I was thinking about it, because they make a deal in this episode, or they point out in this episode that Cass was one of those Ocampa that lived subterranean, and she was able to find her way and make it to the surface, and that was a big deal. She was like one of the only ones that was able to do that. I was just thinking, well, how it seemed like she had just gotten to the surface not too long ago. That's how I felt. Um, how it was explained by the Ocampa that were in subterranean, but obviously Neelix and Kess had knew each other, like somehow had gotten to find each other, form some kind of bond. And so I was just in the background going, well, how did that happen? How did she get captured by the Ocampa in the first place? And maybe they actually explain it and I've just forgotten it in later episodes of Voyager, but I just thought, well, that was just odd. Those different. Um, yeah, but it just didn't quite work for me. I like that Kess is part of the crew, definitely, but just how she gets there just kind of felt like awkward. Like I couldn't connect all the dots right there.
Yeah. Having gone back and watched this now again for the first time in a while, like
Hmm.
I keep saying that. Oh, it's been so long since I've seen this, but I mean, it really has. You go back and you watch random episodes of a series. You don't usually watch the pilot as a random episode.
Hmm.
Um, the first intro of Neelix felt very, very different than he was, even in the whole rest of this episode, let alone the series.
Yeah.
It's like he went from the very first interaction with the crew to being this like debris fielding space junkie, like scrap. I don't know. I can't even think of the word right now, to becoming what he did. And he changed so quickly in the pilot episode.
Yeah,
Um,
he did.
yeah, he really did. It was that was clunky to me. I love Neelix. Neelix, honestly, I know some people don't like Neelix, and I don't really, I don't know, maybe I don't understand because Neelix, so to me, Paris and Neelix are probably my two favorite characters in
Mm.
Voyager. I like all the characters, but they're probably my two favorite. And I mean, we've talked about when we talked about the Voyager series, which you can find on our podcast or our YouTube channel, the series as a whole. I think we did Voyager in like three parts, just as a kind of like an overview look of the series and the episodes. And I remember having a conversation with you, either was during those episodes we did or just on the phone, about the way in which they made Neelix become so aggressively jealous over Kess with people, in particular Paris, just felt like it didn't really fit his character.
Yeah.
Like you were seeing a side of it. Like it's one thing to see a different side of the character, but it just never felt like it fit with his character. And this initial intro, this very first time we see Neelix, didn't seem like it fit with the character, even in the rest
Yeah.
of this episode. Um, but yes, I don't remember either a time where they explain how Neelix and Kess knew each other, how they met, or and we know from other series, not just Star Trek, but just in general, that pilots have a tendency to be inconsistent with the rest of the series. There can be gaps and things that are completely contradictory because it's a pilot and you don't know if it's going to be picked up. But Voyager and these other Star Trek series, they were all pretty much under contract, I believe. They didn't like make a pilot and hope that it was going to get picked up. I think the only time that happened was with TOS.
Mm.
The other ones were, you know, multiple year contracts, I think, from the very beginning.
Yeah.
So that makes it a difference as well. But I would agree with you on that. I don't remember the whole Neelix Kess pre-meeting.
Yeah. So that's okay. I mean, it 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 worked out. I guess
Yeah,
that
but
kind of
I
worked
mean,
out. Yeah.
do you kind of like feel the same way or kind of think what I was thinking about the whole Neelix thing? He's
Oh,
just
I do, because Neelix is a very okay to me. I When Neelix comes to my mind, he's a very good-natured character. He's got a very
yes,
good-natured personality. Like
very positive.
he's
Yeah,
the morale officer, right? And so and he's the cook. Um and he's always trying to do like good things for other people. So it, I mean it makes sense that he would um if he went as a character, he went through all this effort and peril to rescue Kess. I mean, yes, it makes sense that like he would feel sensitive. He would feel like jealous or afraid to lose Kess. Like, yes, that would make sense. He would feel afraid to lose Kess. But maybe if they had played it more that way, like, hey, his fear of losing Kess was really getting to him, but they really played it where, yeah, he was jealous over Tom. And then they played that like relationship in those later episodes. They made a point of like of highlighting that relationship, that he didn't like Tom. Um
Yeah, and Tom never really like went after Kess in the way I think Neelix thought he was, right? I
yeah.
mean, there was a very friendly relationship with them. I think Kess may have had some feeling for Tom a little bit,
Hmm.
but I don't. Tom never, that I can remember, made any type of really hard attempt to go after her or have a relationship with her outside of being. Oh,
Yeah.
definitely mic there. Gosh, almost ate that. Um, but outside of the friendly, yeah, outside of like a friendly relationship, there wasn't really a whole lot there. But Neelix was very protective over her,
Yeah.
very protective over her. And I don't think Tom ever necessarily tried to get in the way of that either. But yeah, it was just strange to me a little bit. And I I pass some of it off as clunkiness of the pilot because every series has had some clunkiness in their pilot episode, right?
Mhm.
Some things we were like, well, that doesn't jive with the rest of the series. I mean, every single one has had that. And it's honestly, it's to be expected of a pilot because things just they change quickly.
Now, this pilot also makes a point of explaining that Paris and Chakotay have some history between each other
Yes.
there. So
because Paris was part of the Maquis only for
Mhm.
a couple of weeks, and then he got caught because I
Mhm.
think he pretty much ratted them out, right? And so he got caught and got sentenced. I don't know if he ratted him out, but he got caught and got sentenced to like I think it was 3 years in that penal colony. And
Yeah.
so yeah,
Yeah. Actually, this was a good like conversation he had with Harry Kim. Because Harry Kim said something like, "Is it true what you did?" And um Tom says, "Yeah, it's true. Like I was with the Maquis." Um, and something happened where he got some people killed. Or maybe he was when he was with the Federation, he got some people killed. Um, but he's but he said all I had to do was like keep my mouth shut, and nothing would have happened. It would have all gone away, but I couldn't, so I
yeah,
admitted it. So that was that was a positive thing that Tom Paris does.
yeah. And Tom Paris is to me, a very complex character, right? He's someone who left the Federation to join the Maquis, wasn't with them very long, gets caught, opens his mouth, all these things happen. He gets put back onto a Federation ship as an observer, then he becomes part of the crew and gets his commission back, albeit I think a little bit lower rank than what he originally had, and goes on this ebb and flow of just he was just different. He was wired differently. He's the son of an admiral. I mean, there's so many things about him
Yeah.
that, you know, are really cool and are fun if you're watching a character develop over time. I think that makes it special. Um, so yeah, it's very, very interesting. I did like, when the first time, and then I'm jumping ahead here, but when Tuvok goes to Neelix's quarters to fetch him,
Yeah.
and Neelix is in the bathtub, and he goes,
Yeah.
"I love how he sells it, Mr. Vulcan," which he uses throughout the rest of the series. I just
Yeah.
love that. It's just very like endearing term that Neelix has for Tuvok, and Neelix doesn't really understand this whole bath thing because he's not used to having water that he feels is just wasted.
Yeah.
Um, there's a scene earlier where Tuvok says something like, you could use a bath.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very,
He says, "What's that? What's that?" He didn't know what that was.
yeah,
Neelix
yeah,
didn't. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. And so I just found that scene very, very funny because the interactions between Tuvok and Neelix throughout the series are wonderful. This kind of annoyed, perturbed response from Tuvok all the time, and then you have Neelix who just wants to be friends with him. He just wants to hang out and get to know him and be buddies. And Tuvok's just like, yeah, keeping him at arm's length. It kind of well, no, I'm not going to say it's a DS9 reference, but I'll just say it kind of reminds me a little bit of O'Brien and um,
Oh,
Bashir at first because
mhm.
Bashir really annoys O'Brien in the beginning. But I will say the friendship there, because there is a little bit of a friendship there that develops between Neelix and Tuvok is wonderful, and I love the friendship that develops between Kim and Paris. They do the holodecks together. They're
Yeah.
they're buddies. They're talking about the ladies in the ship together and the twins that they're always trying to get dates with. And um, I really, really love that friendship between Paris and Kim that develops.
I was wondering if that was going to remind you of the friendship between O'Brien and Bashir, because I was
In
thinking
some
about
ways,
that.
yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
It starts differently, right? Because there's not that annoyance between them. There's not that, okay, he's this enlisted chief guy and Bashir is this, he's a doctor and everything. But there is absolutely some similarities to me in the way in which that develops. And then, the overlap of, they're hanging out together, they're going to the holodeck together, they're doing these things together. Um, to me, the Kim and Paris friendships one of the most endearing friendships in the show, and certainly I could put it up there as one of the best friendships in the franchise.
There you go. It's good.
Really, really love that friendship. I think it's wonderful the way they wrote that.
Paris does a lot of like good things in this pilot episode. Like he wants to go down to the planet to to help save Harry. Because I mean, when Janeway's gonna go down to the planet, he goes, "Oh, can I come?" And she's kind of pretty much questions him, saying like, "Well, why would you want to come?" He's like, "Well, I wouldn't want to leave Harry alone." Like, so that's why he goes to help Harry, and he saved Chakotay's life, like at the
Yeah.
end. Um, so he's good. He's a good guy.
Yeah.
Like,
Their friendship starts. You
yeah,
can see how early their friendship starts, right? Like
yeah.
him and Harry.
I was gonna say, yeah, he's a good guy, except when he's around with the ladies and acting really creepy.
Well, that changes,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
yeah,
he
it
doesn't
does.
he's not creepy the rest of the series. And then, the way in which he kind of attempts to get a date with Balana and she is so rejecting of him. And then eventually she caves and then their relationship builds. And I very much enjoyed Paris and Balana's relationship.
Yeah.
I thought that was very much a lot of like they're very opposite. They don't really have a ton in common, right? But they just seem to work together
Hmm.
very well.
Hmm.
And the things that they introduce each other to and so forth. That's a wonderful relationship there. There's a lot of great relationships that develop in this series, and I'm sure part of it is because they're far from home and they have to rely on each other so much compared to maybe some of the other series.
Yeah.
I just think that they had some really great friendships that develop,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it
Absolutely.
all starts here in the pilot and Caretaker.
Yeah, it does. Hmm. I I want to talk about a little bit about that ultimate decision that Janeway makes.
Yes, I
You
was.
know?
Yeah, I was wondering we were going to talk about that. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. Like uh, so essentially the caretaker is imploring her. He's saying, "Hey, um I want to set the station to self-destruct. I'm going to give the compa all this energy. I'm going to I'm going to seal it off so that they can't get to the surface and no one from the surface can get to them, so they can have all their water that they need. They can have all the energy that they need." And then essentially saying, "Yeah, I'm going to destroy the station so that the Kazon cannot get to the station and get all this technology." Right. Uh, so there was that, and that's kind of the compelling reason that he gives to Janeway on why the station needs to be destroyed, because when the self-destruct of the station malfunctions and it can't self-destruct, he says, "Oh, Janeway, please, like, Captain Janeway, please destroy the station. Otherwise, the Kazon are going to annihilate the Okampa." That's the compelling reason. And then, she goes on and she does destroy the station. And as I was thinking about this, I was like, I was still going, I don't know. I, I was just, I don't know. Like, at most, I was like, well, maybe. Okay, here come the Kazon, and they're coming with their big ships, and yeah, they want to they want the array, they want that technology, they want to get to the subsurface of the planet so that they can get the Akampa. But I felt that was like that was pretty quick to come to the conclusion on let's blow up the station.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. And so I wish it was more. I don't, I just, I wish it was more, I'm looking for the right word, eminent, where I felt it was more eminent, where you absolutely had to destroy the station. Maybe the station was going to fall into the uh planet, and the station itself was going to destroy the Okampa, like, settlement. But I just found myself thinking about that, going, I don't know.
Yeah, the penultimate decision by Janeway.
Yeah.
This one decision, of course, affects the entire series. If this decision didn't have to be made, there would be no Voyager, at least in the sense that we know it as. I think that I hate to say it, I think the writing on how they came to make this decision the way it was for Janeway was not good. And let me explain on that for a quick second. I agree with you. I think it should have been some type of imminent danger, right? That's like if the station isn't destroyed, it's going to hit the planet. Oh, the Compa are going to die, or whatever, something, right? The way in which we see the Kazon in this, why would we, buy in and believe that the Kazon are that big of a threat? They're just these just kind of dirty raiders that are very primitive and okay, so they have some weapons. So what?
Hmm.
Like, why should we believe that they're a threat in this case? Also, I feel like if you had given this type of imminent threat, it makes Janeway's decisions easier. That there's
Hmm.
not, if this doesn't, if the station isn't blown up, it's going to hit down and it's going to kill, I don't know, million Ocampa or, but, whatever, fill in the blank. And it makes that decision less controversial. But on the other side of it, I could also advocate for the fact that by making the decision so controversial, it has that decision and the controversy behind it has so much implication on Janeway and her mental health and her decision making moving forward. There's a lot of episodes where this particular decision in Caretaker comes back on Voyager. If you think about the episode where she locks herself in her quarters and won't come
Hmm.
out and
Yeah.
nobody sees her and they're in that like black void where there's no stars and everything, that's a huge part of why that happens. And that episode doesn't happen if it's an easy, quote unquote, easier decision. So I could advocate that, yeah, this that had to be this way, or maybe you could have executed differently. But the decision of her to do what needed to be done that results in them being stuck in the Delta Quadrant has significant ramifications and makes significant waves throughout the rest of the series on the captain.
Yeah, that's a great point you have. I mean, before she makes the decision, Tuvok actually points out to her, he says, we can just, I think this is after the caretaker has died. Tuvok points out, well, okay, we can just leave now, because the prime directive, if we follow the prime directive, it says, we can't interfere and we should just
Yep.
kind of get out of here. We can't do this. And Janeway kind of asserts, well, she does assert, says, well, we're involved now. And it's not our fault we're involved, but we're involved like nonetheless. Right. So she's still going through her mind, you know, doing that. Tuvok is giving her a way out, but she's
Yeah.
saying, hey, we're involved. And so therefore, I'm going to make this decision now and destroy the array.
But see, I think it's almost like she's trying to justify her decision
Yeah,
to
she's trying to
stay.
justify. Yeah, yeah.
And I don't think her justification is valid in this instance. Like Tuvok is speaking from a very logical standpoint. He's quoting the prime directive. I think he's right in this case. I think Janeway could easily live with the decision to leave and let everything happen the way it does because the station's destroyed and everything. So if they leave, the station would still have been destroyed. So why does Voyager need to be a part of that and stay in order for that to happen if it would have already happened anyways, even if they had left? It's one of those things where it's all there's an episode of The Big Bang Theory where Amy Farrah Fowler ruins the Raiders of the Lost Ark for Sheldon, and then Sheldon ruins it for the rest of his buddies. When I don't know if you remember this, where she says, if you take Indiana Jones out of the equation, everything happens exactly the way it does in Raiders, and Indiana Jones plays no real part or significance in the movie. And then it's completely ruins Raiders of the Lost Ark for me. He just gets so irritated. And so I say that because in this episode, if Voyager just leaves, doesn't the array get destroyed anyways, and the
Well,
comp are protected? And like,
well, well, they said the caretaker said that his self-destruct like malfunctioned, so he couldn't, it wasn't going to automatically, the array wasn't going to automatically get destroyed. But it's not like, I mean,
but couldn't Voyager have helped destroy it and then leave?
yes,
Or
you
like
would
leave
just put
before it gets destroyed and give him
just put
something? Like,
like a time bomb on the array to
yeah.
blow up like after an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Put a warhead or something. Put a couple of photon torpedo warheads in there. Put them on a delay timer and then leave.
Yeah.
I know it's a TV show.
I
I'm
I know.
overcomplicating it,
We're
but
overcomplicating it. Yeah.
well, but at the same time though, there could have been other options. I think there would have been options that Janeway they could have left and been able to help. But I just felt like Janeway was like, nope, yep, we're gonna stay. We gotta, it's almost like she made the decision in a vacuum. She really didn't consider everything. And to me, this is
Hmm.
the issue that I have with Janeway early in the series, that she is so quick to make a decision, and a lot of times it involves Starfleet protocol and Starfleet regulations, and they point out to her many times, her crew does, especially Chakotay, where it's like, but we're not all Starfleet here, right? Because
Yeah.
of the Maquis, and
Yeah.
yes, some of them were former Starfleet, and B'Elanna, I think, fails out of the academy, right? I think that's what I remember. They're not all Starfleet, and she and oh, by the way, they're so far from Starfleet that do these Starfleet codes and regulations still really apply? And we can have a philosophical debate about that another time if you want. But I don't know. I mean, her whole thing is I got to get my crew home, right? And eventually she gets to the point in the series where she's like, okay, maybe I need to be less rigid and closed off to other ideas that don't involve some line and some Starfleet manual or regulation on how to make this decision. She's just so caught up in that it really blinds her decision making. And that's I had that huge issue with her character early on. Later
Yeah.
in the series, she changes that and she's more flexible and willing to do things. Now, some of those things that you'd argue are a little maybe borderline on the morality side of things, but in general, just the day-to-day stuff, I just felt like she became more flexible and open to other options and ideas. Where in the beginning, and in Caretaker is another example where she just isn't. She's like, nope, that's what we're doing. Let's go.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you make a great point that this decision connects to the later on episodes of Voyager, and we've talked about this before because she's riddled by guilt
Mm,
about her decision, right? So
yep.
which makes sense. Uh, and I I know we don't have a problem that that the decision is that she stays in the Delta Quadrant. But I think I think you and I both feel like, well, the circumstances around it just seemed like, hey, could have been a little bit, you know, a little bit different. There seemed too many ways to say, to get out of this, to get out
Yeah.
of this particular circumstance where they just could have still left, could have solved the problem and could have left. Um, I don't have an issue that hey, she had to make a decision um and it just, that was the decision that made them stranded in the Delta Quadrant. Um, but the circumstances just could have felt like different to me, more like imminent, more compelling, more
Yeah.
in your in your face. Yeah.
I think kind of what you're getting at, what I'm thinking on this too, as you're mentioning this again, is this idea that it just wasn't as dramatic, I felt like, as it could have been.
Hmm.
Right. Yeah, it just could have been more dramatic instead of this, oh, well, this self-struct's broken and you got to help me destroy this thing. And well, but she's a Starfleet captain. She came from sciences. They couldn't have scienced something for it to blow up after they're gone. Like, come
Yeah.
on. That just doesn't seem right to me. Like, you're telling me all the brain power on that ship and they couldn't come up with
Yeah.
something that would, make it happen. They could still get home. And I know it's because they wouldn't have been stuck in the Delta Quadrant and we wouldn't have the show we have. But yeah, I just I kind of think about this episode as a whole, and there were just several things where I'm like, yeah, that could have been different, or that could have been executed better, or this was just corny, or uh, you know. Uh, when we go back and do our like rack and stack of all the pilots, I'll be
Hmm.
curious where this one falls on the list because we still got to do Enterprise and Discovery and Strange New Worlds and Lower Decks and all that stuff. But I'll be curious where this falls because we have our thoughts on this, and I'm interested to see how it
Yeah.
will compare to the other series we haven't done yet.
Yeah, me too. That'll be interesting to see. Um,
Yeah.
and again, we
What?
both love the entire series. Just
Yeah.
yeah, this one
Yeah.
was like oh.
Yeah. There could have been. I don't know. Maybe, I mean, the whole caretaker thing, okay, I get it. I'm not against necessarily the idea. I felt like maybe there could have been some better ways that they could have done. Now, okay, I talked about how like Q didn't really feel like he fit
Yeah.
in the series the way they brought him in. Now it well, maybe bringing Q in for the Voyager pilot would have just been a retread of TNG, but maybe doing it a different way where Q like he throws him into the Delta Quadrant for something, I don't know, make it up. And then that's how they're stuck there. And then you bring in the Q element as a piece that is known, a piece that you feel comfortable with and you're familiar with. But then again, that would have people would have looked at it and gone, "This is they're just retreading the TNG stuff." Maybe that would have been too, I don't know. Um, the caretaker idea wasn't bad. It just was, I don't
Yeah.
know that, like I said, not executed that well.
And the caretaker as a character was not strong to me at all.
Yeah,
It
no.
just you had the old man with the banjo, and then you had a gelatinous blob. Those
Old
were the
man with a
visions of,
banjo and
yeah.
gelatinous blob. I love it.
Yeah. Those were the character, or that was the caretaker. I'm like, well, eh, I mean, in at least in we talked about like Toss having Q in there, and Q was kind of this catalyst character, like getting them into this conundrum. But he was a very strong character,
Yes.
and so was,
Big time screen presence.
yeah, good screen presence, and so was Gary Mitchell. And so
Yes.
I don't know if you have, yeah, if I mean the name of the episode is called Caretaker, and if you've got the caretaker is the one responsible for bringing the Voyager to the Delta Quadrant, hmm, oh, should have been more.
Yeah, don't you feel like the caretaker, it would have been more significant and bigger presence and stronger character if they had made him like kind of insidious, like just, this and maybe part of it was is that he's so filled with anger and rage and emotion because of the guilt of what has happened to the Akampa's planet, and now he feels stuck because he's having to take care of them out of this thought of guilt, and he's bringing other species in almost as like instead of trying to find a way to continue his life, maybe that's not even an issue. He's got a long life expectancy, but now it's more of like he's bored and now he's bringing other species in almost as like a game. And he's
Yeah.
toying with the different species lives, and that's that insidious kind of just sickening type of character where you're just like, this thing's playing with other species lives, and he decides who lives and who dies, not like from a god sense, but just from this, he has all this such advanced technology and abilities that he can do that. To me, that would have been a bigger, larger presence, a
Mhm.
more evil, sinister, something where the crew is afraid that they're not going to get back or they might live or die. And then you build this dramatic level up and up and up until the very episode where they have to destroy this caretaker because of what he's doing, and that makes them stuck.
Yeah, because it doesn't make any sense to me. Like if they say he felt so guilty, they came to the Ocampa home planet. They did something where they they really hurt the Ocampa atmosphere, the planet's atmosphere. So therefore, he felt like so guilty, so bad, so that he has to stay to take care of them. And he said he had a partner, but she apparently left. And I don't know if that was ever explored in later episodes of Voyager or not. I don't remember, but I don't recall if they ever find her. But in any ways, he's got this conscience, like where he feels so guilty, but yet he's bringing in he's kidnapping essentially all of these people from around the galaxy, like so he's bringing them like way far from their homes so they can't get back, so that he can figure out who he can procreate with so he can make a descendant. But in the meantime, everyone that fails to have compatibility with him dies. Like
Yeah.
that was the thing. So that is not making any sense to me.
Yeah, because if he feels guilty for what he did to the planet of the Ocampa, why isn't he feeling guilty for people dying for him trying to find a mate? And oh, by the way, why does he think that he's going to somehow find some compatible species? Like it just, yeah, there's just so much that doesn't make sense to me. The concept of the caretaker, I think, is fine. The way in which they bring it together and bring the story together just doesn't really make sense. And I feel like it really misses the mark for a pilot.
Yeah. And yeah, he said they were explorers from another galaxy, and had no idea that their technology would do that to this planet. And the first thing that popped up into my mind was like, what, they didn't have like similar planets in that other galaxy that you were at? I mean, even if it was at another galaxy,
Yeah.
it probably bound to have similar planets.
But also, too, right? If they have this technology that's so advanced that they can travel from another galaxy, which is so far, I mean, the distance between
Mm-hmm.
galaxies is massive. I mean, you're talking massive. So either they live for almost eternity amount of time, or their technology is one that gets them such insanely incomprehensible distances in a shorter amount of time. They didn't have the ability to predict this or figure like, yeah, it just there's so many questions I have
Yeah.
that doesn't make sense to me. Now that being said, I love the line that Janeway says at the very end of this when she tells Lieutenant Paris and she says, "Set a course for home."
Hmm.
That's a great way to end the episode.
Yeah, it is. I
It
agree.
really is. It is poignant. It's beautifully written. And I know it kind of trashed on some of the writing in this particular episode, but that was a perfectly written line for Janeway to say. This idea that it's set a course for home. You're starting your journey now from the end of this pilot, and the journey now begins to make it back to where they started,
Yeah.
back to the Alpha Quadrant.
Yeah. So it's good.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, Star Trek Voyager, I think maybe doesn't get off on the best foot as far as some of the story, some, not all, but some of the story in the pilot episode. So what I love about this is we're getting to go back like we have the other series, right? And in this case, Voyager with the episode The Caretaker, and we're getting to see where the characters start. We did this with all the other ones, and we will with the rest of them, but we get a chance to go back at hindsight and look at where the characters started, how they're introduced, and then kind of do a little bit of reflection on where they came from to where they end up by the series end. And so it just makes you appreciate the characters a lot more. It makes you appreciate how they develop the characters and where they bring them to from this particular starting point.
Yeah. Yeah. It sure does. I like to be able to think about that. Particularly like Janeway, of course, because she's got to deal with all she's done, and all she's decided to make it back. Um, yeah.
What I like to do as well, excuse me, is you get to look at the character knowing what you know and say, okay, I know the kind of character they're going to turn into. And I think that adds a greater appreciation because if you just for in this episode, the caretaker, you look at the way they introduce Paris, right? He's a convict. He's in a penal colony. Uh Neelix is a trash pirate of some kind, and then all of a sudden becomes what he becomes. Kess is this beat up Wakampa. We know what she becomes. The doctor has got terrible bedside manner, which kind of carries throughout most of the series, but he really has such an amazing story arc in the way they develop him. And you just go through each of the characters and you look at that and how they change and how they interact. And Chakotay and Torres becoming Maquis and Tuvok, who's a Maquis spy or Federation spy with the Maquis and so forth. I think you get a certain level of fondness for the characters because you're able to look back at them knowing everything that you know.
Yeah, sure, of course. That'd be a fun thought process to go through.
Yeah. And it's that I mean it's that way in every series, right? I mean, even TOS when we did the two pilots there, because you have the 3 seasons of the series plus all the movies and the way the characters change and grow. I really like being able to do this where we go back and look at the pilot and knowing what we know, kind of hone in on the characters and say, oh yeah, well, oh, that's right. They did say that in the pilot, or wow, their intro into the series was different than I remember. Or when we did the TNG one, for example, Counter Farpoint, we talked about how that really awkward first meeting between Picard and Riker, he doesn't even really look at him, and it's just this strangely awkward thing,
Yeah,
knowing that they become so close over the course of the series and the movies.
yeah, definitely. Hmm.
It
Yeah,
really it changes your view on the characters, I think, a little bit, being able to look back with the hindsight.
yeah. Well, and Janeway never really mentions her fiance anymore.
I
So,
know.
yeah.
Or her dog. I mean,
Oh, the dog. Yeah.
we're animal lovers, we're dog lovers. I mean, I would be constantly thinking about, you know,
I
my
miss the
dog. I
dog.
mean, because dogs don't live as long as humans. So it takes them what, 8 years to get back. The dog might not be alive anymore. We don't
Yeah.
know. So, anyways, yeah, I don't know. But for excuse me, those of you watching and listening all over the globes in the interweb, I said globes again. Gosh, I do that all the time. The
Yeah.
globe in the interwebs. We very much appreciate it always. Thank you so much for tuning in and taking a look and walking back with us to the beginning of Voyager and Star Trek Voyager's The Caretaker pilot. This has been such a fun, awesome spotlight series so far, and I cannot wait to continue as we then look to Enterprise and then Discovery for the first time, and
Hmm.
Lower Decks and Strange New Worlds and maybe Prodigy too. It's a lot of really fun episodes ahead where we get to discuss these pilots.
Absolutely. It will be fun talking about Discovery for the first time ever that we will have talked about Discovery on
True.
here, and I'm sure everyone will hear our strong feelings about Discovery. Yeah.
Well, okay. There will be some really good things we'll have to say because there's some things I very much enjoyed in that pilot episode of Discovery. I remember when it premiered because they had mentioned, I think, when it was coming out that it was going to be like one of the flagship series on Paramount Plus, and
Yeah.
or no, it was called CBS All Access originally, I think,
Hmm.
and then became Paramount Plus, and everybody was really frustrated about that. It was going to be behind a paywall, but they aired, I believe, the pilot episode on network television for everybody to watch it as, like, I guess, as a teaser. And I remember some things about that, so it'll be fun to chat through the memories of that. And I mean, visually, it's stunning. So there'll be some fun stuff to talk, but we'll have our rants for sure.
Yeah, it will be good. I remember I had either gotten a gift certificate for a friend specifically for CBS All Access to watch Discovery on
Yeah,
the that first season. So
yeah,
yeah.
that was many moons before the Random Redshirt podcast became a thing. And now I have not watched the pilot since I watched it the first time on network television. It's going to be really interesting to go back and watch that again for the first time in so many years, 5+ years now, and be able to discuss it from the lens of the podcast that we have.
Likewise. Yeah, it'll be
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. So thank you again, everybody. As always, be sure to go to Facebook, Instagram, Threads, YouTube, podcast platforms, all that stuff, and follow us there for more information and episode announcements. We greatly appreciate it. And we'll be back next time with another amazing episode, another look at a Star Trek pilot or something else, whatever we decide on. And until then, we'll catch you next time right here on the Random Redshirt Podcast.